And we are live. Hi, I'm Autumn Keynes from Columbus, Ohio, with Virtually Connecting, your virtual buddy today, connecting with some folks over at the Campus Tech Conference. So I'm going to turn it over to them to let them introduce themselves, and then we also have some virtual people from around the world joining us, and we'll have some introductions from them afterwards. But first, folks who are at the Campus Tech Conference, introduce yourselves and tell us how you're doing.
Well, hi, nice to be here with everyone. I'm Rebecca Peterson. I'm the Director of Online Experiential Learning here at Northeastern University, and I just got done on a panel over at Campus Tech and also the ABLE ePortfolio Conference talking about the future of ePortfolios and assessment and experiential learning and all that good stuff. And I'm here with my good friend AK, or actually AK invited me, last week to join in on this fun. I've seen it before, so AK.
I'm AK, teach long and prosper. I'm usually from UMass Boston, but I'm actually mobile today, quite literally. And I'll throw it over to the virtual folks to introduce themselves.
Great, awesome, excited to hear that. So why don't we start off with Bonnie? Bonnie, will you give us an introduction?
Sure, my name is Bonnie Stachowiak, and I'm joining you all from Southern California today. I teach business and management, and one of the things I love to do is get to talk to teaching and learning experts from all over the world through my Teaching in Higher Ed podcast that airs every week Thursday mornings, and it's been fun actually to have some of the people from Virtually Connecting on the show, and look forward to having more in the future. So I'm just pleased to be here. I always learn so much on these sessions, and I'm just grateful for Virtually Connecting.
I do enjoy your podcast so much, and I love that your most recent one with Gardner, you actually picked up on a theme. Like it was almost like something we were talking about in a Virtually Connecting session. You're like, well, let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's nice. I'm actually going to have Ken, who's on connecting with us today as well, on an upcoming episode, and it's nice to get a chance of the rhythm of someone's conversation and the way they dialogue and tell stories. It helps me be a better interviewer.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, welcome. Hey, Ken, why don't you give us an introduction?
Oh, so I'll unmute my mic. So I'm Ken Bauer, Canadian, living in Mexico for the last 20-something years. Teach undergraduate computing science. And as Amy said in the morning, I love putting love in the classroom. So that's my tagline for today.
All right. Thanks, Ken. Hey, Maha, will you give us an introduction?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Maha. I'm Egyptian. Trainer, coach, learning and development consultant. That's me from Cairo.
Thank you, Maha. And last but by no means least, Rebecca Hogue.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Hogue, and I'll take Ken's theme. I'm a Canadian, but I'm living in Southern California. I'm not Northern California. I live in Sunnyvale, California. And as Ken and I discovered on the Virtually Connecting session yesterday, we actually did our undergrads together, almost quite some time ago, which is mildly amusing. Small world, this Virtually Connecting stuff. And I'm a co-founder of Virtually Connecting, and I teach instructional design in the online. I teach on the online portion, or well, a couple of online courses at UMass Boston, and I'm doing a PhD at the University of Ottawa in Canada.
Always great to be able to spend some time with you, Rebecca. So I don't usually structure these things too much. I just kind of let them flow like a natural conversation. AK and Rebecca, you guys have been at Campus Tech since the beginning. We've talked to some other people about the conference, but I'm curious about how you guys are feeling about it. Since today's not the last day, tomorrow's the last day, right?
Sounds like tomorrow's the wrap-up day.
Tomorrow, yeah, it's a half day tomorrow, a couple of sessions in the morning. This goes both for ABLE and Campus Tech. Couple of session blocks in the morning, and then a wrap-up keynote. I really wish that Campus Tech and ABLE would stagger their keynotes so that you could attend all of them.
Looks like there's a parting of the ways though next year. They're not going to be co-located, I think.
It seems like it. I haven't been able to see where Able is next year.
I think they're figuring it out with the the exec board. There's a high, I don't know, don't commit. I know this is out on the internet and it's broadcast. I think they're trying to figure out, could it be hosted at an institution or
that would
somewhere.
explain the pace.
Yeah.
Because I saw Pace 2017.
Maybe.
But I wasn't sure if that was the official. So it's been interesting. We just came back from a portfolio session, and for me, what was interesting was there were three perspectives. There was the sort of coming from K through 12. There was a higher ed perspective, and then maybe a job market perspective.
An emerging industry perspective.
Yeah.
From the higher ed point.
Yeah, from the higher ed lens.
So. Yeah, there was an interesting and this is part of the panel that I was on, that the conversation was more around kind of where are we with portfolios today and kind of what's the trajectory forward. And I was more focused on the ABLE track this week. I haven't really been participating in the campus tech other than running into colleagues and friends because I literally work across the street from the conference. So even going to get coffee, I see people. I get the best of the conference with all the hallway conversations without really going. But anyway, it's been interesting to see in the ABLE meetings, if you followed, it's a smaller organization, very niche, but focused on e-portfolios. And I'm not sure who among us has worked on e-portfolio initiatives over the years. I definitely have, and that's what brought me to the panel. But I think what struck me was there's all this potential still, but a very kind of confused dialogue around what the e-portfolio is still. And its value and where it's positioned in the institution. And
what's your goal?
Exactly.
One of the things early on with e-portfolios, one of our mutual acquaintances, I'm not going to say his name on there, since I don't know if that's okay with him, but an former instructional design student, now instructional designer, wanted a portfolio to showcase to employers. And that's not necessarily what you do in a lot of what you do in the classroom is refining your work, but it's not refined work. So you want to show your refined work to the employer, and that stuff happens outside.
Well, I tried to articulate it around this idea of portfolio as compliance, and I have to, or this idea of really achieving the dream, if you will, this kind of lifelong learning, this artifact or this opportunity that it follows you throughout all of the different kind of permutations of your life and how you not only learn, but you work. And I think in order to get there, we still need to sort out a lot at the institutional level, or maybe we assume too much in higher ed that it's got to be driven from the higher ed institutional level. But it's interesting that my experience with portfolio is if you say that in your own local little ecosystem, everyone's going to have a different definition of that. And it can be very personal at a course level, this specifically, and then at a programmatic level. And then maybe at an institutional compliance level, accreditation level, one of the institutions I used to work for, it was definitely driven from a compliance accreditation around teacher ed, which left little space to really realize, I think, broader potential on what portfolio does. But even among ourselves, we're talking about portfolio right now, but I'm curious, what are all your experience with portfolio, or do we even have a common definition among us around what portfolio is?
And I wanted to bring something up because I was reminded when you talk about portfolios, some of the early work that was being done at Athabasca quite a while back, actually. But I remember it it felt like too much like an add-on and extra work as a student. And if it's not going to be in the domain of my own for my employer for later and being part of that blog that is something that is my identity that I'm going to take with me, then it's just extra work. Right, to manage that or to do that. And so how do you position that, I guess, or how does that make any sense? Do you know what I mean?
I don't know if anybody, it does make complete sense. And I think even part of the panel presentation, it kicked off with a gentleman from the consulting organization EduVentures, which always is like the Gartner of higher education. They'll go in and analyze and research, and he was trying to paint a portrait of a landscape, if you will. And I think it's still kind of stuck in this, to your point, Rebecca, it's this extra thing that came up today. It's just like we stuck it on there. And when I say a culture of compliance and accreditation, that's been my experience. Yet also the institution I worked with that was really trying hard with portfolios, we had kind of before we had the maker movement or that term, we had a pretty nice emerging arts community going on campus. So we had an art school and an expressive therapies group that were approaching it very differently and in some ways freely, kind of thinking of this expression of work, expression of what's possible. And in those conversations, it was very freeing. You know, even though they might be using the same tool, the mindset around it was very different. And it's how do you get to either a shared mindset of what this is so it doesn't feel a part of it, and maybe that's organic to maybe certain disciplines even. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure though. I mean, I think it's something people are still trying to figure out.
In some ways, I sort of see that as sort of the difference between critiquing and grading. And then the minute you tie e-portfolios to grades, then suddenly it becomes this thing where students have to perform, and it can't be that place where they can put something out for friendly critique, as it were, like critique in a loving way, if we want to go back into that whole loving thing, which I think is really actually important in this aspect, is if you want to get students to learn by sharing their stuff, it has to be positioned into the feedback from a loving perspective as opposed to feedback from an academic, I'm going to eat you alive perspective.
And with my Mexican students as well, having this culture of, is this what you want? Is this complying with what you're expecting? And I'm throwing them in this curve of, well, I don't know, what do you want to write about? And it freaks the heck out of them.
Well, then can you make it part of, as you're saying, Rebecca, and kind of like centered around part of the instructional and the pedagogical experience? You know, it's not, here's the instruction and here's what we do, and now you're going to turn this in. And then it becomes just a very, to your point, am I doing it right? Am I going to get the score on the rubric that I need? But can we flip it around into being much more integral into part of the learning experience and watching the kind of evolution of a product or a process in a very transparent way? And, which really requires this acknowledgement of work, what the value of the student work is and its role in the learning process, as opposed to something kind of like final thing you deposit at the end of the course or you're tested on. It's a real shift instructionally and I think pedagogically for the way we often teach at the collegiate level.
And it's also, at least the way that I see a lot of portfolios, it's very token or item focused. I'm dumping in a presentation, I'm doing this paper, I'm putting in a paper, but there isn't really an easy way to account for some of the things that NEU is doing with their co-ops, for example, actual lived experience.
I think you bring up a great point, AK. I mean, here, if you're not familiar with Northeastern, being a part of our brand, if you will, is our co-op model, and even part of my title is online experiential learning. So how many opportunities in different ways can we work into the curriculum and into the trajectory of a student experience here, real world opportunity, even if they're an online student? What kind of projects are integrated into the coursework that either simulates or really is part of what goes out in the world? And then what are the different models, whether it be co-ops or we call it co-op at work, that we're really conscientious about ensuring students can really pull on real life experience as it aligns to the curriculum. But it doesn't mean we've figured this out totally yet. Like, we're still in a very messy process on how to, if you will, architect and track and, really make that process visible. I think we have a really kind of exciting thing going, but we haven't done as well around making the portfolio deliberate. In fact, portfolio is not always required across programs. We have it available, but the conversation around it varies. So I think, I don't know, I think it's just still, it's something that people are always interested in, the C-portfolio idea, but it's like many things, and it sometimes gets regulated as a tech solution or an ed tech project. And when I was at Lesley University for many, many years, like for over a decade, I kept pushing it out. It would land on my desk because I was in charge of ed tech and e-learning, and group process of diligence between the provost's office and a dean's office to get people around the table to talk about what we meant about assessment. Because I kept stepping back saying, we just can't go buy a product because, it's like a house or, what is it? What style are you looking for? What is its function? Who's it for? act in it, what are those spaces? Do you want contemporary or Victorian? And I was trying to make it in like very tangible terms so people could understand that this wasn't just like go buy a license to TaskStream, and then it's solved.
But for
and so
some
anyway,
people, that is what it is. For a lot of people, that's what it is. Maybe not whole schools. I mean, maybe whole schools. I don't know. But I think, especially at the department level, that's what I've seen. I've seen, people are like, hey, I just, I need a solution. I'm just going to buy this thing.
I wonder, and this is just an out loud wondering. I'm a great verbal thinker, which gets me into a lot of trouble. So I want to preface verbal out loud thought. That's not necessarily.
Go for it.
So for those people watching this, the one or two people that watch it later, but part of it, I wonder, it's the vulnerability of not just the student. There's a vulnerability for the student to make their work viewable, but there's a vulnerability for the faculty member, because in these collections that we're curating, the faculty member, in certain scenarios, they're also visible internally to their department. If some people are really trying to do some decent, sophisticated work to kind of track progress and scores and see evidence of impact, and people are doing some decent work around efficacy, there's a real vulnerability for the faculty to have to really start to think about not just their instructional approach, but the assessment approach, the types of things that they're asking of the student. And, if we used to have like a signature assignment, so each course and each program would have, the course, no matter who was teaching, there was one assignment per course that everybody had to give. And optimally, depending on how you architected your course, though, the student should still show competency in that assignment, and there could be wide variation. And some institutions just implement without really kind of stepping back and thinking about how is this an opportunity to talk about teaching. But at the same time, not everybody's looking forward to that opportunity to talk about teaching either.
And this reminds me a little of how this really fits into the work of, let's say, a departmental curriculum committee.
Yeah.
Because hopefully you have program level outcomes. Classes, your core classes anyway, address those program level outcomes so that when people finish those core courses, they've demonstrated mastery of those core outcomes, and then the portfolio is supposed to showcase that. So the portfolio is the end piece, and if the portfolio is not working, then the chance light back on the process and saying, okay, what are you guys doing?
And that feedback loop, that cycle, often it's just that part falls off. It's like, did the student get it done? And I think still today there are many programs that don't have really clearly articulated program goals. I mean, part of my work is working with programs of study, not just to bring courses online or hybrid or think about, how they can work online, but part of that process, quite frankly, is talking about, well, what's the programmatic vision? What's the goal? At the end of this, and I start very simply, what do people go off and do and try and backwards design? And, sometimes depending on the discipline, I, get very functional, which is fine, but this is the job that they get. Okay, well, what are the types of things they need to know to do those jobs? And where does that fit into your program? And there are some programs that get excited about that conversation, then a few others like, we're fine, our graduation rate's great, they get jobs right away, that's their benchmark. Are we graduating people and are they getting jobs? And if they are, why do I want to mess with this?
Yeah, if it ain't broken, don't fix it type of mentality.
But others do approach it as an opportunity and also kind of see this need as not just new students coming in from K-12, but we have an eclectic range of students, particularly here at Northeastern. We have a large graduate professional certificate program. So we have a lot of adult learners and non-traditional students. And so, there are all different kinds of students that we work with, and how do things like portfolio, but then even we want to get away from the portfolio conversation, adaptive tools, how do these work to serve the needs of the student, but also how do we implement them thoughtfully and not just as a tech solution. Which I don't know that's a hard game to get out of, I think, to just say, oh, it's a tech solution, go stand up that platform.
Almost I was going to jump on your point, Rebecca, about the faculty kind of exposing themselves there. I implement the last year and a half basically like DS 106 type connected courses with my students. So when they publish on their blog, it's showing up on my syndicated blog feed. And to be honest, some students' stuff is great. I've got students in computer science like writing poetry or short stories around their code. But then other students, it's just like a screenshot of their code, and it's just really not that great. But I don't care. I'm not afraid. I'm the foreign faculty that can get away with stuff. Whereas a lot of faculty really are scared to put themselves out there and have that control being lost. How do we get them to not be afraid?
I
Amy
honestly,
Collier, just big
yes.
just big love.
Amy had a
Amy has
had
the
a
answer,
profound
and it's going to
impact.
happen in her keynote tomorrow. Be sure to tune in.
I think part of it is I don't know how involved you are in tenure and promotion, annual faculty review type things, but I see some of that on my end, and I think we go back to what gets privileged in annual faculty reviews and tenure and promotion cases, and what that is research, conference presentations, publications, and teaching is underprivileged in some senses. The institution.
It depends. Even Leslie was a teaching institution, non-tenure, but you could get long contractual. There's still rank and promotion, but it was a non-tenure institution. And teaching was rewarded, but there was still, please go research. And then I've worked at our very intensive R1s where, and even here at Northeastern, there are certain programs I work with that the faculty are pretty direct. It's like, hey, I need to publish, and I'm first and foremost about my research right now. And this teaching's important, but this whole online, this is not my priority. But unless you can kind of figure out a way that it can help me with my research, and or we can still change the system. And this is a comment for years. I think everybody knows this. I don't think this is a surprise.
No.
That our incentive system is completely out of whack with our expectation of innovating in the classroom and the learner experience, and yet real effort to move that conversation forward. I just haven't been seeing it on a national level or an international level.
And part of it is accreditation related.
It is. Rankings, that whole ranking
game. And that's a game that you can play and you can game that.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm thinking, going back to Amy Collier's love and risk, which I guess is the flip side of that coin. We'll find out tomorrow. It's like when you're in a small department or even a medium-sized department and you have your colleagues, you should be okay with taking a risk and sharing what you're doing in class and having colleagues say, I see what you're doing, I see how that works for you in that context, it's not going to work for me, or maybe I can adapt it, or maybe here's an idea if what you're doing to be working.
Well, the interesting thing so one of my original topics early in my doctorate was studying faculty. I used to be a director of faculty development, and I'm wondering, and I'm not saying this is true for everywhere, but I don't know just in how we nurture and grow our new academics. The idea of nurturing and growing is not necessarily endemic to the practice of becoming an academic or in certain fields that you enter into. In some ways, the badge of honor, I've worked long hours in the lab, I've done kind of slave labor for my chair or others and this gets passed on. It may not be the same at every institution, but I've seen a range, definitely, between Harvard and MIT working there and, other teaching practitioner-oriented institutions. I think, how we help the next generation of our academic leadership, our faculty and teachers, like how are they mentored, how are they nurtured? Because they tend to replicate this is how they came up, and they're replicating that with their next generation as well.
And this reminds me of not just faculty, but also staff. We have at UMass annual staff recognition awards, and the stories that you hear before people go up and receive their award. This individual put in the long hours and did this and stayed extra hours, often not paid, and did it with a smile for the students. And I'm like, that's really great.
You can still do that with love, I hope, but it shouldn't be with...
But it shouldn't be the distinguishing factor, And it reminds me, when I was a student coming into college as a first-gen student, I saw this study smarter, not harder, and like, That's a good motto. We should be doing that for, how the university works and also rewarding the smartness of work rather than just putting in the extra hours because it's needed. I think we all do that, but that shouldn't be the only rubric.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're just blathering on over here. We can keep going. I mean, the idea of love, the idea of like nurturing, and it can even, that is not something that's maybe in the nature of the academy as it's structured.
We can change that, though.
Which we can change. Some institutions have that in their DNA. I mean, I look to mission and not like leadership, and it all kind of, I say, just trickles down. But how is your department what is the leadership like? What's the kind of, connective tissue? And people model that. And then the challenge is, if you want to make a shift, how do you bring in or start to foster trust and willingness to shift in a different direction?
I have one quick question for you. I'm sure you'll have an easy answer for this too, because it's really easy. How do you approach faculty who have somewhat of a, I can't do technology, I'm just not a techie, I can't do it, and they just have this fatalistic view of it? Do you have approaches that you use in trying to influence them?
I don't know. One of my tried and true, I think a lot of people, as often as possible, there are two approaches I take. I try and have them talk with a peer, or have like a peer mentor, have them observe a peer. I find that's very powerful. Sometimes if it's a generational thing, I found early in my career, across my staff, I'd actually make decisions who I would pair people with, and usually on a generational level, that worked better too. Particularly because I've observed this, or faculty kind of like, oh, you are like me, we're like the same age, or they could like really kind of start talking about some other things that wasn't the work that they needed to do, but there was a relatability there that made it personal for the faculty member, and they could see a person, and I'm not inferring that just because you're older you don't know tech. That's not what I'm trying to infer at all, but I felt like from a peer level that was really important, whether it was within the same age group or professionally. But I tend to always like to get faculty talking to other faculty.
Yeah, I really appreciate a like a mentoring or a coaching kind of model.
And it's generally non-threatening. I think people tend to let their guard down, and their curiosity, comes out, or how did you do that, or I saw that, and then it can kind of go from there. And mentoring models just around tech, but all levels of faculty development and professional development.
Right. Hey, I want to be aware of your time there on site. It is about 4:31 is what I have Eastern time right now. How are you guys doing on time? And are we okay to keep talking, or do you guys need to split? How are we feeling?
I would say
another 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we're going to need to probably wrap up.
Okay. I mean, I guess I want to. What would we have in the chat here?
I think Maha might have a question.
No, I think she's okay.
Actually,
She was saying she's good listening.
That, I mean, everything that is being discussed was very interesting, but there's a lot that I'd like to discuss further, perhaps on another occasion. I would have liked to hear a little bit more about, about the experiential learning, and what you think about it, what are you doing about it, and so on.
I think I heard, so you were a little quiet. I think hearing more about the experiential learning piece.
Yeah, that's what she was asking at the end.
So I give like a high level overview about what we're doing, and then definitely we can follow on if there's interest in your community. We can definitely always follow on with more conversation, and even some of my other colleagues who work squarely on it. So right now at Northeastern, I'm part of a group that's part of what we call our global network, and it really is focused on our online students that are throughout the world and the country, and then also some of our regional campuses. So we have campuses in Silicon Valley, Toronto, and Charlotte. And a lot of these folks are adult learners coming to get graduate degrees or certificates. And one of the things they don't necessarily have co-op. something that Northeastern does in its undergrad and graduate full-time programs. Students will go off for a semester for 1 or 2 co-ops, and they can travel around the world, and they have really great opportunities. And I'm not saying this is the same as co-op, but here's one example of some of the things we've been piloting. So we have something called the Experiential Network that allows some of our students, and they can be on-ground students too, it's not just for online, but some of these students in the programs can get placed with an organization and even work virtually with an organization to do a very targeted project. And they would have a mentor at that organization to help them guide them through the project. The project obviously aligned in their degree area or their content focus. They don't get credit for it, like course credit yet. There's some conversation on how this would work with the traditional credit model. But what they do get is an acknowledgement on their transcript right now. So it's a non-credit experience, but at least goes on the transcript. And then if, something to put on their portfolio, reference, recommendation, all that stuff follows. And students tend to, I would say, squeeze it in. It was interesting. They started piloting it this fall, and within a week they had 100 volunteers of students stepping forward saying they understood it was non-credit and they were already registered for classes, but yeah, they would love a 6 or 7 week really kind of focused project-based experience aligned with their degree program. And Northeastern, like many organizations of our co-op, we have extensive relationships with lots of employers, not just in Boston, but around the world. So we're able to leverage that and find interesting projects. We're always looking for new projects as well. And it's a great opportunity. We've been finding, especially not surprisingly, nonprofit organizations that have a lot of need, but not a lot of capacity or staff, have been great partners with us on this as well. We've been helping them, but also getting students to them that can help them on their work as well. But I think it's one of the things we haven't figured out, not to beat the drum on ePortfolio, is how does that work get realized in a portfolio model as well? There's opportunity clearly there, but kind of the first step was to kick the tires around what's the potential for this and how far can it grow? And where is it different from our co-op model? What distinguishes it from other things that we have in service learning and all these other opportunities? And what we're seeing is great demand from the students. And then, frankly, the programs, too. As faculty, there's always this when faculty see their students getting excited about something or students are talking in class about something they're doing, then faculty get very interested as well about what that opportunity is. One of the opportunities that happened in our Seattle campus, frankly, was a project then. One of the faculty worked with a local business, and the students were doing a CCIS for them, but it became part of their CCIS project, their computer science project. Was doing a build, and it was kind of inspired through this experiential model. And so we're hoping to also see more of that at the class level, that we could bring in industry projects that the students are actually doing and prototyping as part of their coursework in certain disciplines. That was a really long, I talked really fast.
I think we've eaten up our 5 minutes. Whenever I think about ePortfolio, one of the things I always want to talk about is ownership, and we didn't really get to that, data ownership specifically. In terms of students, I always see situations, especially with vendors, where vendors, they come in and I'm like, okay, but how does the student interface with the data, and how does the student own the data at the end of the day once they graduate? And they're like, not really, and I'm like, oh. But we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, I have a whole kind of, even on a real basic level, it's almost like you get it during your program, or sometimes they treat it like a textbook, so you're paying for it yourself out of pocket. And then to continue access to that, you can still do it, but you got to keep paying directly. That's a whole,
even that
thing.
I'm okay with. I've had some vendors that really do lock it down, and it's really more about accreditation. It's more about program review. It's more about data collection on the student, and a lot of those kind of like feed into and off of other systems that the university owns.
Yep.
And so it really embeds itself in a way that makes me nervous, because it becomes so integrated in other systems that we're so tied to, that I'm like, how could we ever get rid of it? It's sort of like you buy this like contraption that's a TV and a VCR and a DVD player and a record player, right? But if one of those things goes wrong, then the whole thing is not good anymore. So yeah, those kind of things. So this is a very rich conversation. We should find a way to try to continue.
In the next episode.
And yes, right? Part 2.
Thank you so much for joining us.
We'll expect AK's in-depth write-up of his event.
Yes.
Since this is
Well,
the last of it.
thank you, AK, for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for joining us.
This is what happens over beers when you see some, you know. But no, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always fun to get to talk with colleagues outside. Well, it's always fun to talk with colleagues during the workday, but when you get to step out of your normal routine, it's a great opportunity, even though I think AK and I took most of the oxygen out of my office here. Anyway, thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you
day,
so much
everyone.
for your time, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Well, I just want to remind everybody that we are still live. We're still going through. We can still talk a little bit if we want to. I don't know. What are you guys thinking? How was that conversation?
How are you for my brain's full.
My computer has decided to have a spinning ball on it, so I can't see you anymore. But
A
I can
fun
hear you
conversation and then the back channel as well. So
We can
trying
hear.
to grab screenshots. I guess just kill. It was too much for my computer's brain.
Oh, that reminds me, I grabbed a screenshot early on and never tweeted it. Oops.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've got
the
a few that
conversation
I
for
was
that.
attempting to tweet, but I just didn't quite get there until the spinning ball came.
Nice.
What were you saying here, Ken? Some of your students love this mode of learning?
Well, the experiential learning and writing about what they're
Mm.
doing and that, well, I experimented with no grades and abolished grading this semester, and it freaks the hell out of some students because they want tell me exactly what I have to memorize so I can vomit it up on the exam, and I wrote about that in one of my latest blog posts about the good, the bad, and the ugly of teaching evaluation comments.
So I have a way of dealing with this that I'm going to propose, but I for my class in the fall, but I've never taught it before, so I don't know if it's going to work. Tell me if you guys think that I'm crazy. Are you guys familiar with the
You're crazy.
Cynefin framework? Thanks.
The which framework?
The Cynefin framework.
No, I don't know.
So it's a complexity. It's like a sense-making model, and it has like it's not just like a regular grid with like a like a horizontal and a vertical axis. They're kind of wavy lines, and so it divides things up into like simple and complex, complicated, chaotic, those kind of things. And so it makes the case that like in the domain of where we're talking about things like best practice and good practice, those are things like simple and complicated domains, and those are places where we have answers, and maybe there's shift a little bit, like the complicated especially, right? There's can be some shifting, but you can have a best practice, but there is a domain of complex and chaotic where really nobody has a lot of good answers, and things are changing so quickly that you really kind of need to sense or probe and figure out what's going on and then act once you get some more information. So I'm going to think about trying to introduce them to that framework and see if it can help me to make the case that there are times when we can find answers and we can check a box and we can fill in a bubble, right? That world exists, but there are other things in our world besides that.
Last year on my work with go ahead, Maha. Your go, Maha.
No, I was just saying that also what Rebecca said is very important. I was just going to say, but that it's very contextual. There might. It's not just that nobody has or not a lot of people have good solutions, but the solutions are different for different people.
Yeah, and I think that this framework does a good job of just kind of showing that, like, we make sense of things in different ways, and that can be cultural, that can depend very much upon the environment that we're in or the context that we happen to be in, whether it's cultural, whether it's environmental, whether it's political, whatever.
Learning's messy. I remember last year I worked some with Alan Levine, introduced me to this group for the Agora project that we shared at Open Ed in Vancouver. And Nancy White has this word confusiasm, which I just love. And the translation to Spanish was easy because it was confusiasmo. And it's when you're on the edge of confusion and enthusiasm, and that's really where we learn. And I just love that idea that you came up with.
Hey, Rebecca, can you spell Cynefin?
I just put a chat. It was me, Bonnie. It wasn't
Oh,
Rebecca.
I can't
Oh.
see the chat anymore because my little ball is going around.
CYNEFIN framework. She linked the wiki.
I did the Wikipedia article, but if you look, there's actually a Harvard Business Review article and some YouTube videos. A guy named Dave Snowden. I think it's his baby.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you for being my eyes.
It's funny, we think about that with virtually connecting a lot, right? Trying to figure out what people can see, what you can hear, what you're experiencing, and then trying to, you know, make affordances where there weren't some before. So
it's wonderful. All I can see right now is the cartoon that's at the top of Ken Bauer's blog post. And it says I have a very bad feeling about this.
Watch that first video, Bonnie, from Paula. It's really, really nice. There's a 2-minute video that my student made about her experience. It's really nice.
Oh, I can't wait to see it.
She made my day when I heard it. Yeah, the affordances are important, Autumn. I keep seeing Maha's picture light up like she's talking. Then I want to be quiet so she can talk because her volume's low.
No, I wasn't. Perhaps because of, I have the fan running next to me.
Excellent.
yeah, that's the other thing too, is the background. It really is interesting doing this kind of work, right? Thinking about perception, what you're perceiving, what other people are perceiving through these technologies. It's very interesting.
It's fun that we connect more here than we do with the people across the hall from the office as well, in many cases.
Yeah, you know, I've heard people say that, but I don't know if that really shocks me that much. Like, it seems to me like it's kind of a special magical thing, finding people that you can relate to, you know? And it's like in a situation where you're in you know, an office environment, a structured environment, if you're in an institutional environment of any kind, right? You didn't choose to be with those people usually, right? You were put in a position, you were like awarded a job or whatever, and I just feel like there's a lot more chance involved in something like that in terms of finding people that you connect with. And so now we have technologies that allow us to have these conversations, and now I think through this kind of collective conversation that people are having, people hear like, oh, hey, you're talking about the stuff that I'm interested in, so then we use the technology to come together.
There's a self-selection bias here, and as Becky just said, we connect because we want to, not because we have to, so there's a total self-selection bias of this group.
It's one of the things that I think about a lot when I'm interviewing people for the podcast is when they have these incredible programs, like Rebecca Peterson's program sounds amazing for experiential learning. When you come from an institution like I do, you might instantly just have this barrier. We could never do that. We could never do that. Or when Gardner Campbell was on and he was talking about the great VCU bike race.
Right.
And he just won an award for that, I think, at the same conference. And it would be so easy to just think, we can't do that. You know, assessment, some of the people today were talking about it like it comes second nature to faculty, and I'm thinking, not where I work. But I try to break it down and think, well, what could be some small piece that we can take away from something like that?
You nailed it, Bonnie, there. I had this conversation. I talked in Mexico City with public school educators for primary and secondary, and I was going on about the weird stuff I do, and they're like, but we got all this organization above us, and I'm like, well, just find a piece that you can innovate with. Find a small thing you can change within your box.
Yeah. I was thinking about when they were talking about the portfolios that my institution doesn't have that kind of holistic, longer-term thinking to start with something their freshman year and build up every year. But the importance of even just introducing them to LinkedIn from a perspective of someone looking at someone else's profile, and the kinds of things that they notice about it, or questions that they have when they go to look at somebody's profile that's in a job that they might want to pursue sometime, and just trying to do these little small pieces that we're not ready to do online portfolios, but we can do something smaller.
Mm-hmm. Or I got my students to be public inside the walled garden of Schoology at first, where they submitted an assignment, but I also said, you've got to copy-paste your entire text that's the answer to your assignment there in the public discussion underneath the homework assignment, so that you're sharing it with at least your colleagues in the class. and then the next year I made them publish on a blog publicly. But it was baby steps towards where I am now.
And I'm doing a domains project with my students.
You're doing a domains project?
I am. I'm going to do a domains project with my students, with my digital citizenship students I've got. But it's going to be a very small class. And I have a pipe dream of trying to find some inroads where we could adopt it institutionally. For me, it's the digital identity and the digital literacies, which are then built into, for me, digital citizenship, because I'm finding that word means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah, I keep mixing my metaphors there too.
So what it means to me is, just creating a person who's going to be, I don't know the right adjectives to use, but healthy, productive, positive person in the world, in society, and be able to interact with other people. And I think we get to that through examining identities and how they interact with environments and how they interact with other identities in specific environments. So
I found all sorts of guests to join me in this week that we have. Like Gardner had that week in BCU where they did the bicycle project. Our university system shuts down for the week for classes at the end of September this year. A system-wide now, too, across our 32 campuses, where they just do a project or they go travel somewhere but we have no classes for a week. And I've got a lineup of people I want to invite to talk to my students about digital literacy and digital citizenship. Yay!
That's
Expect a call, Autumn.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I really want to do the domains project because I want them to own. I want them to at least own their data for a year, right? If they want to keep owning it, that's great. I really hope that they will. But if they want to let it expire, that's okay too. And
it's wonderful because I've had students that are publishing on their own blogs, and then they keep blogging for other projects, and I see that something planted a seed in them that they like blogging for whatever their student group is, and I've also found students go back and they find the assignments from my past year's students' projects, and I'm like, I don't care. I want you to go look at other people's work and learn from it and say what you like and what you don't like. And it's awesome, and it still stays there. I keep a copy of everything with this syndication thing, so I flip a switch, and so I keep a copy of everyone's work on my own blog. But most of my students keep their blogs there. They're there forever. And it's not a domain of one's own setup. It's they just put their own WordPress blog or Weebly or whatever the heck they're using. I try to keep it standard, but it's really great to see students take a huge interest in pride in the way their blog looks. And I've got students who spend like the first 2 weeks just going nuts about setting up their WordPress and templates, and I'm the opposite. I don't care about how it looks. I just want to put content in there. But go for it. It's awesome.
But the look is part of the content, right?
For me it's not, but for them it's the most important one. So.
But I totally get that from a comp sci perspective, because there's part of that getting a WordPress thing to do what you want involves learning the PHP and learning the theme background and learning how to hack it.
Yes.
Right? How do you hack WordPress to make it do what you want it to do?
Yeah.
And that's just such a great learning activity in and of itself.
Sure, if they want to develop their own plugins, go for it.
Yeah, well, even if it's not a plugin, it's like take an existing plugin and make it do what you need it to do. You don't even have to create, you don't have to develop something for publication or anything like that. You just, learn how to child plug in, as it were.
Well, and that comes back to the whole idea of a domain of e-portfolio, right? And what is an e-portfolio really doing, right? And is it a domain that you own where the student is creating something that they want to show to the world, or is it something that the institution is tracking for, different to meet different analytic, points or data
That's
points
where I'm
or
almost leaning to wanting it that they have their own thing, as opposed to our university providing the domain of one's own. So there's that kind of line I'm treading on?
Yeah, and that's, I think, the big question at the end of the day. I want to be aware of the length of this video, and I think we're at about 50 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. If we want to
Sure.
keep talking offline,
Okay.
we can. But
I wanted to bring up sort of one more point because it's related
Sure.
to what we're talking about, and it sort of goes back to, and I just wanted to put a call out to, and I don't remember his name, but at D-Learn, Kristen Student spoke about a post.
Andrew, right?
Andrew, yeah, that went viral, which was actually about how if I grade it, is it really my own? If it's
Right.
graded, is it really my own, right?
Mhm.
And that whole conundrum, and I think
Yes.
that's exactly the conundrum that ePortfolios proposes.
It's a great article. I have it in my reading
Yeah.
list for my students. I have him read his blog post as well as Audrey Waters' blog post.
Right, and it has a point about we all have different voices. So when the student's writing for a written thing that's marked, then their voice is going to be different than if it's just I'm sharing stuff on the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and at the same time, though, is there something to be said for the fact that, when you do it through an institution, I mean, that's part of the thing that I want to challenge them with is you're kind of becoming a public scholar. I mean, you're an undergraduate public scholar. You're not Cornell West, right? You're not like a public intellectual, but you're a public scholar on the internet, and that's different than blogging with your friends or having a social media account with your buddies, right? It's a little bit of a different way of thinking about things.
And I have that discussion and explain to them that their stuff's showing up on our course website in the hub, and then that's an important conversation to have as well there.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. If you've been watching, thank you. And if you're watching after the pace, then thank you.
Thank you.
All right.